Have you ever opened your door to someone, not because you were ready, but because you thought it was the right thing to do? And have you ever watched that same person steal everything you never thought you'd lose? Your home, your marriage, your peace. Hey, my name's Jessica. I'm 35 years old. And for most of my life, I believed that being the good sister meant putting others first, even when it hurt, even when it broke me. But let me tell you a story about a midnight phone call, a lie dressed in tears, and how I discovered my own sister faked a pregnancy just to steal my husband. She didn't know I owned everything, but by the time she found out, it was too late. In the next 30 minutes, you're going to hear what really happened behind the closed doors of a quiet home in Colorado Springs. A story about betrayal, boundaries, and the painful beauty of starting over. It's not just a story about losing a marriage. It's a story about finding the strength to walk away, even when the ones hurting you share your blood. So take a breath and come with me back to the night it all began, because sometimes the people we save are the ones who were only there to watch us fall. It was 12:47 a.m. I remember because I had just turned off my audiobook, set my phone on the nightstand, and rolled over to face the window, grateful for the quiet. Then it rang. That kind of ring that slices through silence and makes your heart skip, 'cause no one calls at that hour with good news. It was my sister Madison. We weren't close, not in the way most sisters are. There were no weekly check-ins, no birthday surprises, no matching tattoos or tearful reunions, just polite distance, few texts on holidays, a strained kind of love you hold on to because you're taught that family matters. But that night, her voice cracked the moment I answered. "Jess, sorry. I didn't know who else to call." She was crying, breathless and quiet like she didn't want to be heard. Madison had just been laid off. Her company shut down overnight. And if that wasn't enough, she'd just been diagnosed with the West Nile virus. Her symptoms were getting worse. She had no job, no savings, and according to her, nowhere else to go. And just like that, I was wide awake. Not because I wanted to be, but because somewhere deep in my chest, that old familiar feeling returned. The need to fix everything. The belief that if I could just help hard enough, things would be okay. So I said the words I didn't know would flip my whole world inside out. "Come stay with me, Mads, until you get back on your feet." Sounded simple. Few weeks, a warm bed, big sister helping little sister. That's how it's supposed to work, right? What I didn't realize then was that the person I had just invited into my home was about to unravel everything I had worked so hard to build. Because sometimes the biggest betrayals don't come from enemies. They come from the people who know exactly where your heart lives. Next up, we'll talk about those early days. The quiet signs I didn't see, the subtle glances, and how getting better slowly turned into something much darker. The first few days Madison stayed with me, the house felt different, quieter, softer, like I was walking through a space made of glass. She looked so frail when she arrived. Pale skin, trembling hands, eyes sunken like sleep had become a stranger. I rearranged the guest room, stocked the fridge with her favorite yogurt from when we were kids, and adjusted my work schedule so I could be home more. I even moved my desk closer to her room, just in case she needed anything. Every morning I made her tea. Every night I checked her temperature. And in between I picked up prescriptions, cleaned the bathroom, ran errands. I didn't mind. This is what sisters do, right? But even then, something felt off. Like a draft coming in from a window I hadn't opened. First, it was little things. The way her eyes lingered on my bookshelf. Not at the titles but the expensive picture frames. Or how she'd run her fingers along the countertop and ask, "This must have cost a fortune, huh?" One morning while I was making coffee, she leaned on the kitchen island and asked, "Do you pay for all of this by yourself? Or does Evan help?" I chuckled, not thinking much of it. "It's mostly me. I bought the house before we got married." She gave a small nod. Too small. Looking back now, it wasn't just curiosity. It was calculation. Madison wasn't just recovering. She was observing, cataloging, assessing. But I didn't see it then. Because I wasn't looking. Because I was too busy being the strong one, the good sister, the fixer. Sometimes when you've been trained to help, you forget to ask if you're being used. And the truth is, not every hand that reaches for you wants to be saved. Some just want to see how far you'll stretch before you snap. If I had trusted my gut back then, if I had paid attention to the way her compliments always came with questions, maybe I would have seen what was coming next. But I didn't. And so the days rolled by. Until the morning she stood in my living room, wearing my floral dress, next to my husband, with a secret that would break the very floor beneath my feet. In the next part, you'll hear how one sentence, 7 words long, turned a sisterly favor into a house built on lies. It was a Friday, one of those ordinary end-of-the-week afternoons where you just want to kick off your shoes, pour a glass of something cold, and let silence wrap around you like a blanket. I remember walking into the house, heels clicking on the hardwood, bag slipping from my shoulder, when I noticed something was wrong. The living room was too quiet, too clean, too staged. That's when I saw her, Madison, standing near the window, wearing my floral dress, the one I lent her months ago, still faintly smelling of lavender. Her makeup was soft, almost bridal, hair neatly tied back. And beside her, Evan, my husband, sitting on the couch, pale and stiff, like he'd just been handed a sentence he didn't know how to serve. Is something wrong? He asked, though my heart already knew the answer. Madison turned to me, her voice trembling with a softness that felt rehearsed. You should sit down. I didn't move. She took a breath. I'm pregnant. For a second I just stood there, frozen in place. The words didn't feel real. Not in that room. Not from her mouth. Pregnant with whose baby? He asked, already knowing, already praying I was wrong. She looked at Evan. And that's when everything shattered. He didn't speak. He just bowed his head like a man who'd lost his own. No denial, no defense, just silence, and the sound of my world caving in. I looked at them. My sister, who I nursed back to health. My husband, who swore I was his everything. And I realized, they had made a choice. Not in that moment, but slowly behind closed doors. While I was at work, cooking, caring, trusting. Thought balloon. It doesn't take a monster to betray you. Just 2 people who convince themselves that what they want matters more than who they hurt. Then came the final blow. I can't live here feeling like a criminal, Madison said. I think you should move out. So Evan and I can start our new family. Actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so unreal, so upside down. That logic didn't know where to land. You want me to leave my house? I asked, my voice cold and steady. She nodded, as if it were the most reasonable suggestion in the world. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't about love. This was about entitlement. About someone walking into my life, my home, and thinking they could steal it because they didn't know I had already claimed it. And in the next part, you'll hear what happened when I reminded them of exactly who this house belongs to. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything across the room, even though I had every reason to. Instead, I walked upstairs. Slow, quiet steps, like I was floating through a dream I couldn't quite wake up from. I opened my safe, pulled out a small folder, the one with the house deed, the mortgage documents, the bank accounts, all in my name. Things I never thought I'd have to prove in my own home. When I came back down, they were still sitting there. Evan, with his eyes glued to the floor. Madison, arms folded like she was waiting for me to come around to their fantasy. I placed everything on the coffee table. Unshakable. This house, I said, meeting Madison's gaze, is mine. Every brick, every bill, every chair you've been sitting in. She blinked. But I thought you and Evan. You thought wrong, I cut in, voice firm. I bought it before we got married. Evan doesn't own a cent of it. Not even a drawer. I turned to Evan then. You told her this was yours. He shifted uncomfortably. I didn't want to look like a failure. You didn't want to look like a failure, I repeated slowly, like I was translating it into common sense. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just betrayal. It was delusion. Thought balloon. You can give people everything, your trust, your roof, your heart. But if they come with emptiness in their soul, they'll still try to take what isn't theirs. Madison's face went pale, her mouth opening, then closing. She looked at Evan like she'd just discovered he was a stranger. You lied to me, she said. You told me you were managing the finances. Evan didn't even deny it. Just sighed and said, I didn't think it mattered. That was the moment I realized. They didn't love each other. They just both loved what they thought they could gain. And now that the illusion was gone, they had nothing left. I stepped forward just enough to make sure they heard me clearly. You both need to pack your things and be out of this house within an hour. If not, I'll call the police. Silence. The kind that doesn't come from peace, but from people who know they've lost. Footprints. Sometimes power doesn't come from yelling. It comes from standing firm when everyone expects you to crumble. And in the next part, you'll hear what happened when the people who betrayed me realized I wasn't bluffing. And how even then, they still thought they could twist the story in their favor. The door shut behind them with a soft click. But the silence it left was deafening. No more Madison dragging her feet down the hallway. No more Evan pretending to write while binge-watching shows on the couch. Just me. And the sound of peace, trying to find its way back into the walls. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. And for a brief moment I thought that maybe, just maybe, it was over. But it wasn't. 3 days later my phone rang. It was my mom. I hesitated, because something in my gut told me this wasn't a call to check on me. Answered. Her voice was sharp, no hello, no warmth. Jessica, I heard from Madison. You kicked her out. While she's pregnant. I took a deep breath. Yes, I did. After what she did, I couldn't let her stay. You really think that was the right thing to do? She didn't even pause to hear my answer. She's carrying Evan's baby, she has no job, no home. Do you think this makes you strong? Because to me, it makes you cruel. I stood there in the kitchen, the sunlight pouring in through the window, and I realized. My mother didn't ask what Madison had done. She had already picked a side. Mom, I said gently. You know she slept with my husband, right? Her voice lowered. I'm not saying what she did was right. But Evan is older. More experienced. He should have known better. He probably manipulated her. There it was. The old script. It didn't matter how old Madison was. Didn't matter that she was nearly 30, fully aware, fully capable. To them she would always be the baby. And I would always be the one expected to be the bigger person. That's the trap so many of us fall into. We're raised to believe that family is everything. But what they don't tell you is, when you're always the one expected to forgive, you slowly forget how to protect yourself. I was quiet for a moment before I answered. I'm sorry, Mom. But this time, I'm not backing down. You've changed, she said, like it was an accusation. You're not the daughter I used to know. Maybe I wasn't. Maybe I had become something else entirely. A woman who knew the difference between forgiveness and foolishness. And honestly, I wasn't sorry for that. Before we move on, let me ask you something. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Would you have let them stay? Would you have forgiven them for the sake of family? Or would you have drawn the line like I did? Drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Not just what you think, but how this part of the story made you feel. Your words matter. And sometimes saying them out loud is the first step to healing. Well, let me tell you what happened next. Because just when I thought I had found peace, a single message shattered everything I thought I knew about what really happened. The days that followed were quiet. But not the peaceful kind of quiet. More like the kind you feel in a house after a storm. When the windows stop rattling, but the walls still remember the wind. I didn't cry. Not the way people expect you to after losing a marriage, a sister, and the trust you thought was unshakable. I think I had already cried those tears. When I stayed up late cooking for Madison. When I kissed Evan goodnight without knowing I was kissing a lie. Now there was just stillness. I moved through the house like I was resetting a space that no longer belonged to them. Changed the bedding. Tossed the old wedding photo in the trash. Replaced the curtains with something lighter. Sage green, soft like breath after a panic. Every item they touched I packed into boxes. Madison's worn hoodie. Evan's half-finished manuscripts that were really just excuses to avoid contributing. It wasn't anger that moved me. It was something else. Something quieter. Heavier. A kind of mourning not for what was lost, but for what was never real in the first place. You know, people talk about heartbreak like it's a single moment. But truth is, it's dozens of small realizations that pile up until one day. You look around and realize there's nothing left worth fixing. One night I lit a candle, made tea for one, and sat by the window, watching the wind dance in the backyard trees. For the first time in a long time, listened to me. Not to what Mom thought. Not to what Madison expected. Not even to the ache Evan left behind. It was me. And I realized I hadn't been alone. Not really. I had just been surrounded by people who made me feel lonely. Sometimes the deepest kind of peace comes after everything falls apart. And just when I thought I had reached the bottom, that I had gathered all the broken pieces of the truth, a message arrived. Short, simple, from Evan. I need to tell you something. It's important. I stared at the screen. I almost deleted it. But something inside me said, you need to know. Not because you care, but because you deserve the truth. And what he told me next changed everything. I didn't want to answer him. Evan, the man who once stood beside me in a tuxedo and said, forever. Now just a name flashing on my screen. But something in me, maybe not curiosity, maybe not closure, just a quiet need to understand, made me pick up. His voice was low, flat, like even he was tired of lying. I'm not calling to apologize, he began. I know I don't deserve that. But you should know. Madison was never pregnant. I didn't speak. Not at first. I suspected it from the beginning, he continued. She wouldn't let me go to the doctor with her. Kept saying she was too tired. Or that the doctor said she needed rest. I listened, still as stone. I even gave her a clinic's number. She never called. Never had proof. And when your mom gave you that ultrasound paper, I never saw it. I don't think it was real. I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window as the last sliver of daylight slipped behind the trees. It wasn't pain I felt in that moment. It was clarity, a different kind of hurt. Not heartbreak, but betrayal layered in manipulation. All this time, they had me doubting myself, making me feel cold for drawing the line, making me question whether I had overreacted. But the truth, there wasn't a baby. There was never a baby. Just a lie, wrapped in weakness, delivered with a tear. Sometimes the truth isn't what sets you free. It just confirms what your intuition screamed from the beginning. Thanked Evan simply, not because I forgave him, but because his confession finally gave me permission to stop defending myself. After we hung up, I printed out the text exchange. Wrote everything down. Not to share. Just to remember. To keep a record of what was real. So the next time someone tried to tell me I was too harsh, I could remind myself. I wasn't cruel. I was right. The people who lie to you will always paint you as the villain when you don't play along. And in the next part, you'll hear what happened when I called my mother. Not to fight, but to speak the truth one final time. The next morning I picked up my phone. Not to scroll, not to react, but to speak. Called my mother. This time I wasn't trembling. This time I wasn't hoping to be heard. This time I was simply done. She answered quickly, her voice still cold from our last conversation. What's this about? Took a breath. I just wanted to let you know. Madison was never pregnant. Silence. She lied, I continued. Evan told me everything. No doctor. No paperwork. No proof. The ultrasound. You gave me that, not her. And there was never a baby. I could hear the air shift on her end. Slow, uneasy swallow. Do you have proof? She asked, her voice small. I don't need proof, I said softly. I lived it. And that's enough. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she whispered, I didn't know. I really didn't know. I believe you, I said. But I'll never forget how fast everyone turned on me. How you made me the villain for protecting myself from a lie. Thought balloon. The hardest part about betrayal isn't what they do to you. It's how everyone else stands behind them, while you're left alone defending your truth. That afternoon I got a message from Aunt Denise. Someone I hadn't heard from in months. Everyone's talking, she wrote. They think you went too far. Madison is heartbroken. I didn't reply right away, 'cause none of those people were there. None of them came over when I was cleaning the wreckage of my life. None of them offered a place for Madison to stay. But they were so quick, so loud to judge. Eventually I typed one simple reply. If everyone cares so much about her, why hasn't anyone taken her in? No one answered. That's the thing about enablers. They love to tell you what you should have done, but they never actually step in when it matters. That night, I blocked my mother's number. My father's. Madison's. Not out of hatred. Not out of spite. But because I finally understood that forgiveness doesn't mean access. And silence doesn't mean guilt. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to stop explaining your pain to people who never cared how you got hurt. And in the next part, you'll hear how I took back control of my life. Starting with a letter I never planned to send. And a life I never thought I'd have the courage to rebuild. I used to think cutting people off was cruel. That blocking a number meant I was giving up on family, on love, on what if they need me. But the truth, it wasn't about shutting people out. It was about finally closing the doors that had been wide open too long. Letting in every cold wind, every sharp word, every guilt trip wrapped in holiday ribbons. So I did it, one by one. Madison. Block. Not because I hated them, but because I loved myself enough to stop bleeding for people who kept handing me the knife. And it was in that silence, real silence, that something shifted. Not loud, not dramatic, just peace. I took out a notebook, not my phone, not a screen, but something real, tangible, and I wrote a letter. Not to them. Me. No filters. No edits. No trying to sound okay. Just the truth. I wrote about every moment I felt unseen. Every time I swallowed my voice so someone else could feel comfortable. Every time I said, "It's fine," when it wasn't. And then I wrote this. Jessica, you didn't lose everything. You lost what wasn't real. What was never rooted in love. Only expectation. And now you have a blank page again. Use it. That's the thing about rebuilding. It doesn't start with paint or travel plans or new people. It starts with one simple decision. To stop betraying yourself. For so long, I had been living a life curated for other people's comfort. The good daughter. The understanding sister. The supportive wife. But none of those titles meant anything if I had to disappear to wear them. So I folded the letter. Tucked it into my drawer. Not to forget, but to remember that I deserve boundaries, that I deserve peace, that I don't owe anyone access to me, just because we share a last name or a memory. And in the next part, you'll see how I turned that truth into action. Starting with a trip I once canceled for a man who never saw my worth, and finally taking it for me. I stood in the hallway, staring at the spot on the wall where our wedding photo used to hang. There was a faint outline where the frame had blocked the sun. A shadow of something that once meant forever. Now just a square of silence. I didn't replace it with another picture. Not a quote. Not a painting. Just a blank frame. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is leave space. Space for something new. space to dream again, space to begin without dragging the weight of what broke you. That night, I opened my old email and scrolled all the way down to a trip confirmation from 2 years ago. Charleston. I had planned that trip for myself, booked it, researched every charming bookstore, every cafe, every historic street I wanted to walk, but I canceled it because Evan didn't like the sun. He said Charleston was too touristy, and just like that, I gave up something that made me feel alive, to keep someone else comfortable. But not this time. I rebooked the flight. 1 seat. Window view. Friday morning departure. As I clicked confirm, I felt something in my chest exhale. Like I just unlatched a door that had been bolted shut for years. Healing isn't always about forgiving the people who hurt you. Sometimes it's about giving yourself back the pieces they made you forget you had. That week I bought new sheets, hung fresh curtains, donated the couch Evan picked out, painted the walls a soft sage green that reminded me of stillness. And every morning I made coffee for one, and smiled because for the first time in years, that was enough. I didn't check Madison's social media, didn't ask who believed me, didn't explain myself to anyone. Because the truth, you don't need to keep defending the fire that saved your life, just because someone else got burned by it. I used to think I needed closure, that someone had to admit what they did, say sorry, beg to be let back in. But what I needed was a ticket and a blank frame. Thank you so much for staying with me through this story. If you've made it this far, I want you to know, your time, your heart, and your thoughts mean the world. The lesson in Jessica's story is simple. Sometimes, choosing yourself doesn't make you selfish, it makes you whole again. And setting boundaries, even with family, isn't cruel. It's how we protect the parts of us that took the longest to heal. Now it's your turn. Tell me in the comments, how did this story make you feel? What would you have done in Jessica's place? Let's talk about it. Your voice could be the one that helps someone else feel seen. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real, powerful stories coming your way. Because here we don't just tell stories, we find strength in them. Until next time, take care of your peace. And never be afraid to close the door that no longer protects you. And the freedom to write the next chapter without asking for permission.